Is my mask critical?
Okay,
Robert, did you have trouble getting in?
No.
Jason, did you have trouble getting in?
No.
Did you get my phone call?
No.
Okay. Well,
I'm sorry. Did I miss something important that the presentation?
No, I don't think so.
okay, I'm going to share my screen with slides. How do I do that?
Okay.
It says there's a share screen button at the bottom. Should I push that?
Yeah.
And
then look at the screen and see where your slide, there, you've got it.
There.
Okay, so let's go. Okay,
Okay.
and I'll make this bigger, I guess. Okay.
Well, you can do it. Set under slides. Let's see, we're slideshow. Under slideshow on about.
This is good enough because every time I try to use the whole screen thing, it messes something up that I can't get at.
So is this good enough, guys?
Yes, I like
Okay.
it. Very good.
Depends on your font, yeah.
Industrial Society and its Future by Ted, I'm going to pronounce it Kaczynski, who knows? The Unabomber Manifesto. That's the title of this talk. And Ted Kaczynski may have been a little nuts in his later years, but he was a mathematical prodigy. And the book that he wrote contains lots of, I would say, very thoughtful, intelligent analysis of industrial society. And we can decide between us if we agree that his ideas are good or not. It is
Yeah, I'd be very interested in the destabilized thing.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff is pretty subjective.
absolutely, absolutely. So I suggest that we address the content of the ideas and totally disregard the source. Richard Feynman once said, quote, have no respect forever and whatsoever for authority. Forget who said it, and instead look at what they start with and where they end up and ask yourself, is it reasonable? So this is going to be a perspective that is probably different from the average futurist society. It's basically anti certain kinds of technology. So we're going to have to step out of our normal intellectual box to see if there is any truth in what this guy has to say. If at all possible, we could view it from behind a veil of ignorance, and suspend our prior biases and just see if he has anything that we agree with as far as his analysis of the future of technical society. So this is an executive summary. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for humanity. Right there, that could be a whole long discussion. It has destabilized society. It has made life unfulfilling. It has subjected human beings to indignity. It has led to widespread psychological suffering. In the third world, it has led to physical suffering as well. It has inflicted severe damage on the natural world. The continued development of technology will worsen this situation. If the industrial technology survives, it may eventually achieve a low level of physical and psychological suffering, but only after passing through a long and very painful period of adjustment, and only at the cost of permanently reducing human beings and many other living organisms to engineered products and mere cogs in the social machine. There is no way to reform or modify the system to prevent it from depriving people of dignity and autonomy. If the system breaks down, the consequences will be very painful. But the bigger the system grows, the more disastrous the results of its breakdown will be. Therefore, Ted Kaczynski advocates a revolution against the industrial system. This is not to be a political revolution. The object is not to overthrow the government, but the economic and technological base on the present society. So that's an executive summary. He will now defend his position. If people just make a comment at any time, I invite you. There's just so much room for discussion in this talk. So you could, but if you let me get past the executive summary, because he goes on to kind of justify his positions. And I have a slide for every section in his book, but I will probably skip over some of them. It is an indictment of certain kind of technology. He goes on the psychology of modern leftism. He is anti-leftism. By leftism, he means collectivism. He is against collectivism. He says that the leftists, the collectivists, have a feeling of inferiority, and they are over-socialized, and neither of those things are especially important. So I'm going to skip over them. But this here is important. This slide basically encapsulates the core of his argument. He says a lot of other interesting things, but this is the core of his argument. So maybe we can have some discussion on this. He says human beings have a need, probably based in biology, for something we will call the power process. This is closely related to the need for power, which is widely recognized, but not quite the same thing. And when he says the need for power, he isn't saying the need to control other people's lives and the need to be a dictator and stuff like that. He is saying people have a basic, a widely recognized need for power over their own life, power to make their own decisions, power basically to not be a slave. To not be a slave is to have power, at least a modicum of power over your life. So he's not talking about people who are power hungry. He is saying that there is probably biological need for individuals to have power. And he says the power process of, okay, sorry about that. So he says the power process has 4 elements. And if you disagree with this, if we can't accept this as true, then the rest of his arguments are mute. Not completely, but so he says, first of all, his definition of the power process, which he sees as a human need, is one, to have a goal. And this goal should be something that is important and has consequences. For example, like getting food. It should be an important goal. It should require effort. As he goes on to say later, it shouldn't be too easy. And the goal shouldn't be impossible to achieve. It should require substantial effort. And the next part is the attainment of the goal. The goal should be attainable, not some impossible goal, but an attainable goal. And there should be autonomy in achieving this goal. He says individual or small groups should be able to accomplish this goal together. And his claim is that this is a biological need, a fundamental biological need. Do we have any agreement or disagreement on that?
I've raised my hand.
Okay, I can't see that. So Stan, you're gonna have to.
Oh, Jason has his hand raised.
Okay, yeah. What will you moderate, Stan?
Yeah.
People can comment anytime.
I agree with fundamental premises. The need for the goal not to be neither too easy nor impossibly out of reach.
Yep.
Stem human need for self-actualization and self-esteem. If do not anything too easily won, it doesn't carry with it any sense of pride or achievement. I think we can all fundamentally agree on that. But the autonomy, where applicable, I'm not fully convinced that it's applicable for all goals, but probably for most, isn't all autonomy sort of a stand-in for survival? Autonomy contributes to overall survival and therefore adaptation. All striving is for some degree of autonomy, if you really think. But the question I raised my hand was if you would be polite enough to answer, is there's a popular YouTube channel. I don't know how popular it is, but it's an excellent one called What If Alt History. And as soon as I tuned in to your presentation today, that immediately came to mind, because I had to go back and check, and sure enough, it was there under the videos I had watched and my subscriptions. Was Ted Kaczynski right? I posted the link. I posted the link to that video in the chat box below. It's a rather lengthy or long, but that channel, What If Alt History, has done a number of documentaries on history and contemporary society and critiquing contemporary Western society and the materialism that has caused, among other factors, widespread discontent within modern society. I just wanted to know if you were familiar with that body of work, or if it in any way inspired you for today's presentation.
I saw the video, but I chose to use as my basic material his actual book rather than the interpretation of that video. A lot of what I'm going to read here is his direct words, and we can go based on his exact words, we can ourselves as a group decide the merit of his position. But thank you. I have seen that video. And thank you. Posted it in chat so other people can see it if they want to. But I agree with everything you said, Jason. I agree with everything you said. Except maybe the autonomy. There was a recent paper published by CERN on the discovery of a new particle. There were 250 authors on that paper. I wonder how much contentment the 199th author felt about that. When Einstein published his paper, there was one author, Einstein. Autonomy, he did it by himself, and he probably felt a huge amount of satisfaction. The 199th author on that paper that will never get any recognition, I wonder how much satisfaction they really got out of that. I think autonomy is relatively important. The need for it differs for different people, but I think for many people it is important, and the person can get a sense of accomplishment by accomplishing something themselves, or this is what Ted Kaczynski said, or in a small.
Robert has his hand up.
Okay, call on anybody as soon as they can, but I'm done speaking. Thanks.
Okay, so Chris, I'm wondering about this power process, and I'm thinking about security. It strikes me that human beings have all sorts of needs. I think there's a Maslow hierarchy on these things. I don't know where autonomy comes in, but I would think the basic need of human beings is survival, and the securitization of, and I don't mean that financially, but the securitization of their safety.
I can comment on that.
Okay.
That's covered later a little bit, but I'll comment on it now. But go on if you want.
Well, I'm wondering how this power process fits fundamentally. I've never read this manifesto, so I'm wondering how this power process is integrated or leads logically to whatever his conclusions were.
Okay, the way it leads logically to its conclusion is industrial society does not allow the power process to, it undermines the need for the power process.
Does that mean it undermines the ability of individuals to establish a goal for themselves, to work towards that goal, to attain or not attain that goal, and to do it autonomously?
Yes, he makes the case that modern technological society, and I'm not defending his positions, I'm just a messenger. Okay?
I just want to understand it.
His thing is that one of his key points is that modern technological society undermines the capacity of human beings to attain this biological need, which he calls the power process.
Does he give any evidence to it being biological?
I think, well, he says it's widely recognized people have a need for power. Now, what we can do here as futurists, we can look into our own self. This is meant to be a discussion. I don't know if he's right or not. I don't I'm just interested in an intelligent discussion with intelligent people to analyze this project. What do you think personally, based on people you know and your deep knowledge of human nature? For example, people on an assembly line screwing on a cap for 8 hours a day, at least in their work, they have a goal, but it takes no effort. It isn't satisfying. They're not autonomous in the enterprise of accomplishing something worthwhile. So I would say there is possibly some legitimacy to technological society undermining the power process. But let us decide right now, does everybody agree? Why didn't everybody take a turn and say if they agree that the power process is a biological need for human beings? What do you think, Bob?
What do I think? I think it's not the basic need. I don't think it's the foundational need of a human being to be autonomous, or to set goals.
To achieve a goal with a degree of autonomy, not to be autonomous. We're all members of society.
I don't know that is the basic. That is the basic goal. I think, however, that it doesn't. I don't think it's biological in the sense that other animals would exist. I think it's, but I do think that once a human being feels secure, that their life is secure and safe, that this is where they go.
So let me go on. Let me make a comment on that, okay? Two things. One is, this is a thought experiment. A human being who lived in a house and food was delivered and he didn't have to pay for his shelter and he had heat and he got all the books he wanted to read and he didn't have to achieve anything because everything was given to him. He had no goal because he had total security. He had to make no effort to get anything. You think that person, a human being, would be satisfied?
I think he could be.
Okay, maybe there's some people like that. Now, here's my statement about security, since you brought security up, and this is something that he addresses later. And if somebody disagrees with this, just jump in. But he says that we don't really have security today because we do not have the power. We do not have the individual or small group power to be secure. In this society, at any minute, according to him, a SWAT team could knock on our door. Let's say we make some mean post on Twitter. Police could knock on our door, take us away. We are not secure in the sense that we don't have access to our own food. We have to rely on others. If we get a central crypto banking, then we aren't secure. anything we do that is that the government disapproves of, they could freeze our bank account. Is that security?
No.
Right. So his sense of security, he will say this letter, his sense of security is when a person or group feels like they have enough power to protect their own freedom and their own security. In some ways, we don't have much security today. There are too many major forces on us that we rely on. We rely on other people for food. This is his. This isn't mine. We rely on other people for energy. We rely on other people for this. We have to have a driver's license to go someplace. We have to do all this other stuff. We are embedded in a society and we're totally dependent on this society. And his claim is that we really don't have security. What do you think about that?
There's an interesting discussion between John Mearsheimer and Steven Pinker, two kind of, I guess you'd call them thinkers or intellectuals. Steven Pinker thinks that humanity is made up of individuals who create groups or communities, while Mearsheimer believes that human beings are, from the get-go, part of a tribe or part of a family or part of a group, and that the group, the family, etc., makes room for them in terms of being an individual.
I think personally, I think there's legitimacy to both of that, and possibly the truth is a combination of those two. But if you have a group that is, if back in these days the group was small, during our evolutionary history, the groups were 50 people, where you know everybody. Being part of a group of 10 million people really isn't being part of a group, possibly. I don't know any of the answers. These are questions. What do you think about that?
Chris, Carol has her hand up.
Yep, Carol, please.
Yeah, I'm beginning to get more of a sense of what you're trying to get at, because just as expressed here, it's damn vague. But I would assume then that he's not saying all individuals are going to have the same goal, or that a particular individual couldn't be fulfilled having, 7 different goals that they're working toward. So if he's
it's a good point.
If he's just saying that it is an important psychological need for human beings to feel that I know I'm going to have to go way back. There's an experiment with rats where they can be in one of 2 different environments. In the first environment, it's kind of like you suggested. All the food they need is available. All the shelter, everything is given to them. They don't have to work for it. As opposed to, you've got a bunch of rats in a different experiment where they have to work for it. They have to push a lever in order to get a certain amount of food delivered to them. And, if they don't push the lever, no food today. And I think you're getting at the difference between, and it's biological, at least in mammals, right down to the rats, that there is a significant need to feel that you have some control over getting what you need. And that the rats are happier and more fulfilled when they have to push the lever to get, a small delivery of food, when they have to, do other things in order to be fulfilled. If you're talking about a human process like that, then I would agree with you.
Carol, I think that is what he's driving at. And
he's not suggesting that everybody's going to have the same goal or the same need for control.
Exactly right.
Okay.
That's how I read it. Thank you.
Warren?
Yeah, I can't take the TED out of this, because he,
you
talk about it.
You got to take the TED out of it.
Well, you can't because autonomy, he tried to be autonomous, until he was caught.
Yeah,
you
gotta come from a view of nowhere.
Well,
this is
no,
just,
we're in a society. If you have contact with anybody, you're not really truly autonomous.
but that is not a good basis to analyze this. It should be complete. The merit of this should be based entirely on what these words say.
Yeah, in fact, if you had not said that it was by Ted Kaczynski,
yeah,
and you had
Right.
admitted it later or something.
Yep, it occurred to me to do that.
Yeah, it is hard to it is hard to separate yourself from the final act of Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, well, if you want to do an intellectual analysis of this, that has to be done.
It does.
Okay,
I agree.
I'll do it then. Then I'll close off. I'll do it then. In a society, there's no case unless you find some little shed somewhere to bury yourself away from people. There's no way that you're truly autonomous.
I agree with you. That's one of his points, that in industrial society, this is what he's saying, this isn't me. In technological society, it's impossible. It's not impossible, but it's rare to get that. Here's an example of autonomy. A computer developer is developing an app for to sell on YouTube. And this person works by himself for 2 years, or an author works by themselves for 5 years to write a book and then publish the book. That is autonomous, and that is it. This person isn't an isolated, he's in society, he's a part of society. No human being is separate from society. But his accomplishment is of that, achieving that goal is largely autonomous. He wrote that book, he or she. They did the research, et cetera, et cetera. That's an autonomous accomplishment. It doesn't mean that they're not embedded in society. Everybody's embedded in society. There are some people today who can have a goal, like write a novel, make a lot of the effort to achieve that difficult goal, attain the goal, do it autonomously, and get huge emotional and psychological satisfaction from that goal. That can still happen today. But given the fact that there is technological society and there are people who are author number 199 on a paper from CERN, it's his claim. This claim is that is many people do not have a situation in which they can experience accomplishing something valuable, have a sense of power with a degree with enough degree of autonomy that they feel some pride in it. What do you think? Let's open this. I'm doing my best to explain the thinking of from this book, and I don't know the answers, but I'm hoping we can count on you people to have a nice discussion and see what you think.
Carol.
Yeah. If you look at human beings in Rousseau's State of Nature, human beings without a technological society, who are living in small tribes and that sort of thing. Many of those people will be able to achieve this sense of power, this autonomy. But only over very trivial, no, not trivial, very basic fundamental things, like getting enough to eat. As soon as your goal is more than getting enough to eat and feed your children and, stay alive, not be enslaved by the tribe down the way. I mean, your guy who's writing the book is dependent on being embedded in a society that has the printing press. You see where this is going?
Yes, I do. And these are very good points. And this is something which maybe collectively we can resolve, because it's not impossible there's some truth in what he's saying, but there's not impossible that there are counter arguments that are more powerful than what he's saying. And maybe collectively we can get it that your point is totally valid. There are counter arguments to what he's saying. But I would just like to analyze what he's saying and see to what degree we think he's right, if at all.
Yeah. And what I am suggesting is that there is a sense in which the Industrial Revolution created a world with more opportunity for individuals to be autonomous and to feel that they are reaching real goals through their own effort.
Right. What do you think about this? What at the Industrial Revolution, what proportion of people actually became more autonomous and what proportion of people became less autonomous. I agree for the privileged, the Industrial Revolution is a great thing. For the not so privileged, maybe not. I'm saying maybe. In industrial society today, there are certainly people who have really benefited, but if you go over to India, there are people living off of garbage dumps. And so where is the balance? It's really hard to know. I don't know. Maybe we can just throw out ideas. So, but why don't you answer that, if you would, please, Carol, answer that question. Did the Industrial Revolution create more people with autonomy or fewer people with autonomy?
And you're talking about percentage of the population.
Yep.
I would say more.
Okay. Would you say that some were less?
Oh, certainly.
Yep. Yeah.
But I am saying that basically what the Industrial Revolution gave us is, or can give us, is a world in which intellect counts more than muscle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Samuel Colt's quip about the Colt 45 being the great equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, before this time, big men, strong, powerful men, had considerable degree of autonomy. Weak men didn't have so much, you know, not good at protecting their family.
I would disagree with you a little bit there. And if you look at chimpanzees, it's not always the biggest chimpanzee who's the alpha male. It's the chimpanzee who can make alliances. And a big
wait a minute, who can make what?
Alliances. Very common in chimpanzees. They make alliances and overthrow the big guy. If you have one really big guy and you have 10 smaller people who don't like the big guy, the big guy is in trouble. And that has probably been part of the evolutionary history of human beings, which is one reason why human beings are probably fairly domesticated. Alliances did away with the super aggressive human beings. And now we have a lower degree of reactive aggression. So I don't think that's entirely true.
Jason? Jason?
Yeah, I'm here. I had my hand up for a while. It took me a moment to unmute myself. Is it? Hello?
Yes.
You're unmuted, but
You're calling on me. Yeah, no, the reason I raised my hand was, well, the reason why we would want to view, I raised my hand when we were still talking about why we would want to view Ted Kaczynski's intellectual discourse in absentee of his own personal history. And there's two schools of thought with that. One is that it's essential, and two is that it's too often become a Marxist tool to discredit authors using ad hominem arguments. And I think there's a degree of truth to both sides of the argument. I think that there are, how shall I say it? There are not critiques, but there are advantages to both styles. There are merits to both arguments. You know, from that point of view, I would say that his work, it's hard, as others have mentioned here, to remove the man from the work. I mean, it's like asking somebody to read Mein Kampf without thinking of Hitler. I mean, it's just, I posted a quote down below in chat making the opposite argument, but very often, you know, this is a very old trick of the trade with Marxists, and too often in contemporary society, to use the history of the man to discredit the works. But I urge you to try to stay open-minded, as I will attempt to do so myself. It bears noting that Ted Kaczynski's actual IQ, when it was measured, was 167th on the IQ. That puts him in the 1 millionth percentile for the intelligence of human beings, meaning for every 1 million human beings on the planet, he was in the top 1% of every million human beings. So that in itself is remarkable. What's even more interesting is the fact that he was part of the MK Ultra experiments conducted illegally by our government using psychedelics and during the Cold War in a mind control and hypnosis, and I believe the psychic phenomenon. They were actually trying to use psychic spies against the Soviets. You know, apparently our government believed in psychic powers because they tried to employ them. I don't know. Many of the documents were destroyed, and the public will never fully know. But it's one thing to bear in mind that it is well documented that Ted Kaczynski suffered from PTSD for the remainder of his life. I
would suggest that none of that matters.
Yeah, well, I mean,
the question is,
so much,
are these words here true? Do the human beings have a need for the power process that is independent, that is hanging in empty space?
I would say much of the cultural developments that have materialized since his death have done a great deal of service to kind of reinforce his original narrative. A lot of what he predicted has come true in the decades since he wrote his original body of work, lending further credit to a lot of his ideas. I will.
And the purpose of this talk is to analyze those ideas and see if we agree with them or see if we reject them. Carol has made some good points that there are counter arguments.
So I have my hand up. The fabulous Bob Kaufman. I'm thinking that with the gift of consciousness, we go to this space. That it's because we're conscious that we have these kinds of goal achievement types of needs. And I believe we are conscious, though I don't really understand consciousness. So that's what I think.
Okay.
Until I change my mind.
I'd like to say that the idea of the Industrial Revolution, I'm going to agree with Carol here. I think that prior to the Industrial Revolution, we had essentially a ruling class and something like a slave class. And so what we're seeing because of the Industrial Revolution is the increase in the rise of the middle class, which gave more individuals power in their own personal lives to achieve the quality of life that they wanted to have, as long as they were educated and had a chance to utilize the tools at their discretion. And the other thing is that when we do well, we tend to credit ourselves, and when we do poorly, we tend to blame environmental factors.
Yep.
You could say that your teammates failed you or whatever.
Yep.
The alliances tend to break down. And I also have noticed for quite a while since my childhood that certain individuals in the neighborhood who had wealthy parents seemed to have it all. They had all the toys, they had all the best, games. They were if they were reasonably attractive, they had all the best looking boyfriends and girlfriends. And they didn't seem to have to make that much effort at it, because I think that to a certain extent, I think it was a certain rock star who said, first I look at the purse, as being an idea of what you are attracted to sexually. So there is a certain quality of I've got it made just because of my financial wherewithal, that other people don't have the option for that. The one parallel I might make to this, and I'll let this go, is I did try to do a patent at one time. And one of the things, patents are kind of like ideas. Well, they are ideas, but you have to improve in a patent that you have to do a prior art search that proves that it's the only idea out there that's exactly like that idea. And you have to be able to demonstrate the usefulness of it. Those are the two things that you have to do for a patent. And that's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Okay, should we go on?
Jason, your hand's still up.
Jesus.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'll go through every side. We'll maybe skip fast through some. So he says, because of the difficulty of modern people going through the power process, surrogate activities are artificial goals that people often set up for themselves to fulfill the need for the power process. In modern industrial society, only minimal effort is necessary to satisfy one's physical needs. Thus, it is not surprising that modern society is full of surrogate activities, which include activists who work for rights of minorities. For many, if not most people, surrogate activities are less satisfying than the pursuit of real goals. That is, goals that people would want to attain, even if their need for the power process was already fulfilled. Importantly, people in our society do not satisfy their biological needs autonomously. In contrast, people generally have a great deal of autonomy in pursuit of their surrogate activities. So he is saying to some extent that the surrogate activities, the proliferation, the abundance of surrogate activities is proof that modern society does not provide satisfaction of the power process, and that is why people take up surrogate activities. I don't know if anybody thinks that is a little bit of does that constitute any degree of proof
Yes.
that the power process is being subverted in modern society? Any opinion?
I don't think the term virtue signaling created when he was writing this stuff, but it sounds very close talking about.
Right. that could be one, but there are many other surrogate activities. One of the ones he says is, we'll go on with it. But yeah, a lot of different surrogate activities as a substitute for the power process is what he is saying, and that is proof that the power process is not being fulfilled by society, that people have to do these other things that satisfy their need for power. So autonomy.
Is he saying that industrialization has led to a segment of the population being powerless or less or more powerless than they would have been without industrialization, and that leads to a subgroup advocating for their rights? Is that what he's saying?
I didn't hear that that's what he's saying. I think what he's saying is, in that, the thing about activists is that I'm interpreting him. He does not say this outright, and my interpretation could be wrong. But what I think he's saying is an example of surrogate activity, because satisfaction is not found in most people's daily life and work. That some people, because they are not able to execute the power process in their normal life, become activists because they find meaning in that. They find a goal, and they find it takes effort, and maybe they can achieve their goal, and maybe if it's the activists are usually a small group, so there's a degree of autonomy there. So he's saying that activism for minority groups is a form of surrogate activity that is done in order to fulfill the power process.
Okay.
Whether that's true or not, maybe we can discuss it and find out. He says, so going on to autonomy, most people need a greater or lesser degree of autonomy in working towards their goal.
How about the individual who becomes ideological or ultra religious? Is that a similar type of what he is calling surrogacy?
That's a good question. I don't know. Yet most people do not have to exert this autonomy as single individuals. It is usually enough to act as a member of a small group. If people work under rigid orders from above, then their need for the power process will not be served. Through this power process, self-esteem, self-confidence, and a sense of power are acquired. When one does not have adequate opportunity to go through the power process, the consequences can be severe. If the power process is a source of self-esteem and self-confidence and a biological necessary sense of power, if accomplishing things by oneself, goals that are fairly difficult, if that is a source of self-esteem, self-confidence, and a sense of biological necessary power, then when one does not have adequate opportunity to go through the power processes, the consequences can be severe. Any comment on that? Do you agree with what he says there?
I would say that it reminds me kind of the process of going through boot camp as a young soldier. You go through as a team and you undergo a lot of stress and a lot of challenges, and you develop a lot of teamwork, and it kind of generates a sense of confidence and that you can go and do things, which is all designed. I mean, the idea of military decor and training is engineered from the very start to be a way of creating a force and a power and self-confidence and self-reliability. But with the added nature of being, I mean, it reminds me of Freud's Civilization and Discontent. Sorry to break analogies here. There are things that we experience in culture, a lot of advantages that added security. If you hurt yourself, you can call an ambulance, and so forth. If you're out in the wilderness by yourself, and you have a serious challenge like an animal bites you or so forth, you can probably die. So I think that one thing I've noticed about Minnesotans is that they have the house in the city and they have the cabin, and they like to go back and forth between the two to try to experience a little bit of both. I'm sure that when they're out in the cabin, they can go and take a leak off the front porch and no one's going to care. Or if they're out there using their weapons to kill some game, they can have that as well. When they get back to civilization, those two things don't really work out so well. Robert, you still have a question or something? Your hand's up, Robert.
Is my hand up?
Yeah.
My hand wasn't up, but what would be the consequences, severe consequences? I don't see that.
Well, I think what this gentleman is saying is that if the failure of people, if the power process is necessary for self-esteem, self-confidence, and a sense of power, then the absence of the power process may result in low self-esteem, low confidence, no achievements, no difficulty, no obstacles to overcome, no confidence, and no sense of power. And no sense of power can be like, what is it? It's like there's this dire psychological state called learned helplessness. And that is a kind of torture. And some of these psychologists have used that theory on like prisoners to get them to do what they want. It's called learned helplessness. It's a dire situation for human beings. And
okay, thank you.
So
I see it. I see what you're doing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see it. Thank you.
I'm just trying to interpret what this gentleman says. I do not necessarily know the answer. Okay, let's see what he says here. Next one. If we get too late, we'll skip to 25 where he starts making comments about predicting the future. Okay, where am I? We consider the lack of opportunity to properly experience a power process in any of its many forms for any of its many goals as the most important abnormal condition to which modern society subjects its people. Excessive density of population, crowding does not seem to be the decisive factor. Isolation of man from nature. Okay, I lost it, sorry. Okay, sorry. Isolation of man from nature does not seem to be the problem. He claims excessive rapidity of social change, no stable framework. However, this does not seem to be the decisive factor. It is that modern man has a sense of rapid change imposed on him, according to him. Industrial society breaks down the natural small-scale communities, such as extended family, the village, the tribe. However, this does not seem to be the decisive factor. Technological society puts increased disruptive power in people's hands, such as a variety of noise-making devices, power motors, radios, motorcycles, etc. This does not seem to be the main problem, according to him. People moving to new locations, separating themselves from community, doesn't seem to be the problem. He claims that the lack of opportunity to properly experience the power process is the most important abnormal condition to which modern society subjects its people. So let's go on. Disruption of the power process in modern society. We divide human drives into three groups. Those drives that can be satisfied with minimal effort. Those that can be satisfied, but only at the cost of serious effort. And those that cannot be adequately satisfied no matter how much effort one makes. The power process is a process of satisfying the drives in the second group. The more drives there are in the third group, the more there is of frustration, anger, etc. In modern industrial society, natural human drives tend to be pushed into the first and the third groups. And the second group consists increasingly of artificially created drives. In primitive societies, physical necessities generally fall into group 2. If anybody wants to make a comment, you just raise your hand.
I would say that the third category that you showed there, people who don't have enough sense of fulfillment, no matter how much they try, whatever that was.
It's goals that are not achievable, not accomplishable.
It sort of reminds me of the cliche that the problem in society, the problems that we have in society aren't so much about poverty, but they're about the wealthy, especially the wealthy who seem to have no limit to their desire to have more, regardless of how much they have, they need more. And that seems to me to be the point of where that particular type of mentality is dangerous.
Could very well be.
May I interject, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think I can't exactly agree with that, because when we look at the societies, it's not always the fault of the rich and the wealthy that the societies turn out the way they turn out to be. It is definitely a big part of it, because they do have the power, they have all the possibilities to be what they want to be. But also looking at the everyday people, it is quite often the value we give to our own moralities and ethics and all those things that play a very huge role in how our societies are formed. So I'm thinking every human being, when we look at people that are dealing with poverty, people that aren't exactly as wealthy or as powerful, they still have a huge role in the way the society is formed based on their mentality of what's valuable in human life.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see, some people adjust, what time is it? It is 11:12. So I'll just read this. We've got, looks like we may have enough time to get through this. How some people adjust. People differ so greatly in response to modern society. There are individual differences in the strength of drive for power. People vary in their susceptibility to advertisement and marketing and the creation of frustrating group 3 artificial drives. Some people satisfy their need for power by identifying themselves with powerful organizations or mass movements. This phenomenon was exploited by fascist Nazis, communists in particular. Some people satisfy their need for power through surrogate activity. For some people, work is partly a surrogate activity. They work much more than necessary. For example, many scientists. For the majority of the people, the need for the power process is to a great extent not satisfied. He's talking, this is an important point. He's talking about the majority of the people. And if we're going to agree with him or not agree with him, I think it should not be based upon our particular situation in life. His statement is for the majority of people. So is this a true statement for the majority of people, not for us? And for us to decide if this statement is accurate or not, we need to be able to, as they say, have a view from nowhere. Forget about our current situation. Have a view from nowhere. That's the statement from a John Rawls, a liberal philosopher. So you think that statement is true for the majority of people, not for the elite, but for the majority of people, the need for the power process is to a greater or lesser extent not satisfied. Anybody want to agree or disagree?
Well, I'll step in on this one. I think that there is a phenomenon about consciousness which is dependent upon brain chemistry. And I think that people have emotions, and their emotions are dictated by circumstances, but those circumstances basically press the buttons in our mind to cause different brain chemistries to react. And I'm going to go back to a book written by Mark Vonnegut, Kurt Vonnegut Jr.'s son, called The Eden Express, which describes how life can be either driven by philosophical notions about existential issues or it's going to be driven by brain chemistry and the way that we react to and how we respond to those issues, and how our minds are essentially driven by brain chemistry and emotions. I find it difficult. My idea of whatever it is, it must be like to become a psychologist. The idea of being able to help somebody in a psychological session, and when they walk out the door, they seem to be fine. And 25 minutes later, they're having an anxiety attack because their brain chemistry alters in that time frame. And somebody who's been through psychiatric care, a lot of times you look at somebody else's behavior and you think, well, theirs undiagnosed, something. There's somebody who's off their meds. There's somebody who's got too much alcohol in their system. So I think that we have to realize that as creatures of desire, which is what we are, we go through mood swings. And with those mood swings, different philosophical notions take hold. And I think that you have to be cognizant of the frame of reference mentally that people are coming from as they're making statements and when they're saying things. For example, and I'll be done with this. It's very popular in this election cycle to point out contradictions in people's comments about things because we have more connection to their connectivity, and we can say, well, we'll just oppose this remark versus this remark where they're contradicting each other. Well, at the time that they made those statements, they were in different crowds at different points in time and different moods and so forth. And so those things obviously come out as being black and white. So I think that it's a very challenging thing to pin down what humans are and how humans think and why they think the way they do, because some of that has to do with the serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin. Carol, I'm thinking about oxytocin here. Those things make a difference, and some people are just better at blending in and being able to constrain themselves, have a sense of humility, and would rather be caught saying nothing rather than to say something and making a fool of themselves.
Okay, let's go on to slide 14, the nature of freedom. We are going to argue that industrial technological society cannot be reformed in such a way as to prevent it from progressively narrowing the sphere of human freedom. Because freedom is a word that can be interpreted in many ways, we must first make clear what kind of freedom we are concerned with. By freedom, we mean the opportunity to go through the power process with real goals, not the artificial goals of surrogate activity, and without interference, manipulation, or supervision from anyone, especially from any large organization. Freedom means being in control, either as an individual or as a member of a small group, of the life and death issues of one's existence. Food, clothing, shelter, and defense against whatever threats there may be in one's environment. Freedom means having power, not the power to control other people, but the power to control the circumstances of one's own life. It is important to not confuse freedom with permissiveness. Today, the freedom we have is freedom to do things as long as they are unimportant. We are told that we live in a free society, but the freedoms that we have are not as important as they seem. We have bourgeois freedom, freedoms that are designed to serve the needs of the social machine more than those of individuals. One more point, it should not be assumed that a person has enough freedom because they say they have enough. So this is an interesting thing about freedom. How much freedom for the important things in life do we have today? How free are we? Anybody want to make a comment? This guy here who wrote this is not impressed. He doesn't think we have the freedom in the way that he means it, personal power. So what do you think? Anybody? Is he right or not? What is freedom?
Didn't he pass away before the birth of the internet?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, Ted Kaczynski.
No, he died last year. Just last year, he died.
The Unabomber?
So what do you people think about freedom? Do we really have freedom, or are we allowed to do what the people in power permit us to do?
Carol?
Yeah. Okay, I am seeing a real problem here in that, okay, it says by freedom, we mean the opportunity to go through the power process with real goals, not the artificial goals of surrogate activity. Okay, one person's real goal, say they are an actress, a singer, an artist, goals that are one step removed from getting enough to eat, you know. Okay, I think this denigrating some very important human goals as artificial is a real problem.
Yep. Good point. Good point. It would be hard to make a list of real goals because they would be subjective. Yep. Good point. Good point. Okay. It is 11:25. Let's go on, see what comes up next. Some principles of history. This is kind of interesting. If anybody agrees with this, because he wants to change society. And these are some principles from history about social change. His claim is that if a small change is made that affects a long-term trend, then the effect of that change will almost always be transitory. The trend will soon revert to its original state. For example, political corruption. That's an assertion he makes based on his analysis. And the reason he's doing this is he's going to make a case where we need a revolution and not incremental change. And he's basing this on observations from history and the claim that small changes that affect long-term trends just always revert to the original state. So that small changes is not a way to change society in a way that where people will be better off. If a small change in a long-term historical trend appears to be permanent, it is only because the change acts in the direction in which the trend is already moving. Maybe, maybe not. If change is made that is sufficiently large to alter permanently a long-term historical trend, then it will alter society as a whole. A society is a system in which all parts are interrelated. You can't permanently change any important part of society without all the other parts as well. Sounds reasonable. If a change is made that is large enough to alter permanently a long-term trend, then the constant consequences for society as whole cannot be predicted in advance because of complexity. A new kind of society cannot be designed on paper because of complexity. People do not consciously and rationally choose the form of their society. Society is developed through processes of social evolution, and they're not under rational human thought. So one of his reasons for focusing on this is he's going to say we need an economic revolution, and that incremental change is not going to do it. And that there's some unpredictability in this, but he's making the case that it's worth it, even at the risk.
Carol?
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand down.
Sorry.
This slide,
Left over.
industrial society cannot be reformed. His claim is that there is no way to reform the industrial system in such a way to prevent it from progressively narrowing our sphere of freedom. A small change will be swamped by the tide of history. A large change will alter the nature of our whole society in possibly radical, dangerous, and unpredictable ways. It is highly improbable that any way of changing society could be found that will reconcile freedom with modern technology. Freedom and technology are incompatible. Any comment on that?
Did I have my hand up? Because I believe I did.
Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, so I personally do not feel that freedom and industrial technology are unalterably disconnected from one another. In other words, I think you can have that industrial and that technological advancement can lead to more freedom. It doesn't have to, but it can.
Yes.
And that's what I think about that.
Okay.
Carol?
Okay, I think right here, his notion that freedom and technology are incompatible. This comes out of his confusion of my goals are real goals and your goals are artificial goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it is his confusion that everybody has the same goal based on biology is the reason that he sees freedom and technology as being incompatible.
Yeah, I think I disagree with him on this point, but I think what he's saying is that everybody has the same need, and that need.
They don't.
What?
Everybody does not have the same needs.
That could be the case. That's beyond my pay grade to even comment on that.
Well, let me give you an example.
We all have a need for food.
Yes.
We all have a need for shelter. We all have a need for love. So there are some universal needs. Now and then maybe there are individual needs too that aren't universal, but there are definitely some universal biological needs. Some.
Yes. And let me suggest that it's something I have lived myself, that the technological invention of good birth control, which is a technology thing,
Yep.
has basically made it possible for me to live a life that where I am achieving goals that are important and fundamental to me that would be impossible in a society where sexual activity automatically resulted in children.
That's a very good point, unarguable. Good counterpoint to his statement. Good counterpoint. Yep. He could be totally wrong about this. I'm just reporting what he says. So,
Well,
okay.
I think where his wrongness comes in is my goals are real goals, and
Yep.
your goals are just artificial things that have been thrown out by society. Yeah.
That you make not impossible that you hit a core flaw. So, okay, let's go on. Industrial society cannot be reformed. Restrictions on freedom and autonomy are unavoidable in now here is one example that I remember he gave in his book. I don't think it's a particularly good example, but this is what he said. He said, for example, driving a car versus walking. Person is totally free to walk any place, anytime they want, etc. Driving a car, person has to have a driver's license, person has to buy license plates, person has to obey all kind of speed limits and everything like this. And so one question, there is restrictions on freedom when driving as opposed to walking. Now, that's a point he makes, but there is another point, and that is that driving allows a person to go places that they couldn't go to in walking. So, but he may have some threads of truth in what he's saying. They may not be dominant, but there may be threads of truth in what he's saying. And that's for us to decide here. And so let's go on. Restricted. Bad part of technology cannot be separated from good part of technology. Yeah, this is an interesting one. See if you guys agree with this. It is not possible to make a lasting compromise between technology and freedom because technology is by far the more powerful social force and continually encroaches on freedom through repeated compromise. Why? Because a technological advance that appears not to threaten freedom often turns out to threaten freedom very seriously. Later on, for example, walking in the automobile. While technological process as a whole continually narrows our sphere of freedom, each new technology advances. Each new technology advance considered by itself appears to be desirable, yet taken together, the average modern man's fate is no longer in his hands. Is this possibly the case? For example, let's take walking in the automobile. Well, the automobile at first seemed to give some, I'm making this up. I'm not supporting just to make an argument. Walking the automobile at first seems to be a freeing technology. But what about when we get self-driving cars? And what about where it monitors everything we do? And what about when we get into a self-driving car and our social credit score isn't good enough? So when we put in going to the movie theater, it says, nope, your social credit scores aren't good enough to go to a movie theater. You cannot go there. Pick some other place. So is this is a question, is this statement of his, does it have any truth that a technological advance appears not to threaten freedom, often turns out to threaten freedom very seriously? Maybe the automobile isn't at the stage where it threatens our freedom seriously, but according to him, each individual technology taken by itself appears to be desirable, yet taken together and taken to its logical extreme puts average. He's talking about average. He's talking about the average person, not elite. Average men no longer in their family. Any comment on that? Any merit in that statement?
I'd like to mention the fact that, well, first of all, if it comes down to walking to the theater because you want to see something versus having an automobile that won't let you walk to the theater because you don't have the credentials for doing that, that's when you shut the door on the car and walk to the theater. But bottom line, I want to say something about my own self. Back in 2018, I did something I'd never done before. I bought a share of stock. I bought some Tesla. And the reason I did that is because I thought that Tesla, for me, meant investing in a company that was trying to reverse the process of having an economic system which was based on fossil fuel. It was attempting to reverse that process. And I think that, Carol, your medications for being able to put off birth control are an industrial advantage that uses a lot of manufacturing process, that the computers that we have on the servers that are serving this Zoom call are sucking up a lot of power. So if we cannot find a way to replace the fossil fuel problem with a energy source that's more sustainable, that is a sense of guilt that I have about being a participant in a modern economy, in a modern industrial economy. And that's part of why I have an electric car, which doesn't have full self-driving, so I'm still in control of where I go with it. But I do have solar panels, which does help me sort of cut down my expense on driving. So I think that a lot of the things that we're trying to establish, we being people who are environmentally trying to get back to a less fossil-oriented culture, maybe it's not possible to do that. I mean, this is the Tony Seba argument, but I think that the, in quotes, guilt or the sense of guilt that we have about participating in this social environment with all the powers and so forth and all the freedoms that we have from it, the fact that the environment is breaking up and we have floods and fires and wild offsets in these weather conditions and so forth are obviously a part of the climate change phenomenon, which is basically caused by human industrial waste and carbons in the atmosphere. So I think the freedom, it depends on how you think about the freedom. Freedom kind of sounds like command and control, military style or religious style, but it also, for people that have a sense of what's really going on, is a sense of, well, we're trading off our freedom for a lot of environmental degradation.
Okay, thank you, Stan. I'm going to skip ahead to 25, slide 25, because it's 11:43.
So I have my hand up.
Okay,
I think that that technological advancements are a dual-edged sword. They can lead you to more freedom, but they can also give individuals who have more power than you the ability to confine your freedom, limit your freedom. And that this can be done in two ways. It can be done subversively, or it can be done openly. And regardless of whether you have a central government doing it subversively or doing it openly, those who have the power to control individuals or segments of individuals will, left to their own devices, use that power in that way. And even if a society is set up to place limits on their individuals to use their power to control you, they will find ways to change the rules and the regulations in such a way to ultimately increase their power to control people who don't have as much control as them. This can take generations, though it can happen very quickly. And it actually, I think, is the major point that we're making in a vote we're going to take in November. But I think regardless of whether it's an overt or covert type of endeavor, those with power will tend to use it. And those who, and if they're restricted by rules and regulations, they'll find ways to change the rules and regulations. And so that's sort of my way of looking at what happens with this. I don't know that revolution helps. I think it just delays what would happen anyway. So.
and Bob, let me ask you a question. This ability of the elite to control, is that facilitated by technology or not?
Or what?
The ability of the elite to control the masses, is that facilitated by technology? Does that require technology? I
think it doesn't require technology. It just gives them more ability. It also gives us more ability. I mean, it's a dual-edged sword. I mean, we seem to be on a quest for artificial intelligence or whatever.
Okay, with that, forgive me, Bob. May I go on? We've got 11:46.
I do forgive you.
Thank you. So let's go on, and thank you for your comments, Bob. Always smart. Always smart. So this, maybe 3 more slides. This is a prediction about the future. He probably wrote this back in about 1985. So he was thinking way ahead. There's a future. If the industrial society does survive and computer scientists develop artificial intelligence,
He says this?
About 1985, yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Case 1, the machines make their own decisions. Case 2, human control over machines will be made. So this is, if industrial society does survive and computer scientists do not develop artificial intelligence, human work remains necessary. Machines will take care of more and more. Okay, well, I lost it. Will take care of more and more of the simpler tasks so that there will be an increasing surplus of human workers at the lower levels of ability. This is 1985. Those who are employed will need more and more training, more and more ability, will have to be ever more reliable, conforming, and docile, because they will be more like cells in a giant organism. Their tasks will be increasingly specialized so that their work will be out of touch with the real world and concentrating on a tiny slice of reality. The system will have to use any means that it can to engineer people to have the behavior that the system requires and to sublimate their drive for power. So this is a dystopian view, but it's a dystopian view. His dystopian view is a dystopian view of technological society. Any comment on that? Any support for this? We've only got about 10 minutes left.
Carol?
No, total lack of support for this.
Okay, let's go on. Can we go on to the next one? So we have one down vote for this, no support. May I go on, Carol?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just pulled my hand down.
Okay. What is this? Okay, what did I do? What did I do? Did I miss a slide? Well, I got my slides mixed up. Okay, so I'll read it off of this. This one is the future. If industrial society does survive and computer scientists do develop artificial intelligence, this is what he says. If machines can do all things better than humans, and all the work is done by highly organized systems of machines, machines will do all the work. Case 1, machines make their own decisions. In this case, we cannot make any conjecture as to the result, because it is impossible to guess how such machines might behave. But the human race would be at the mercy of machines. This could happen gradually because the decisions become too complex for human beings to make. So 1985, he's talking about artificial intelligence where machines can make their own decisions. That is reasonable. Here's what maybe you have to think. Anybody want to comment on that? These will be the last two things. I'll read it.
How does he? How do humans maintain control?
Okay, well, this is the first one.
Oh, okay.
Machines make their own decisions. Humans lose control. Does this sound like?
Well, I mean, we don't know.
We don't know. I think that is not an impossible prediction for the future.
I do not agree with that.
Okay.
And the reason is we discount scientists who are in charge of artificial intelligence and technology and all that altogether. We're looking at a group of people that aren't exactly involved in these things, or maybe on the lower tiers. and we think everything would be out of control. I don't exactly see it like that. I think there are intelligent people in charge to, again, to make sure things wouldn't get out of control. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. That could very well be the case. I hope that's the case.
I hope so too.
Here is his case one is machines make all the decisions, and that human race would be at the mercy of machines. His future prediction in case two, where human control over machines will be maintained, where we have developed artificial intelligence, but human control has been maintained. And what he says, control over the large systems of machines will be in the hands of a tiny elite. The elite will have great control over the masses. The masses will be superfluous, a useful burden on the system. Subcase is if the elites are ruthless. Exterminate the mass of society. Subcase two, they're humane elites. They will use propaganda or other psychological or biological techniques to reduce the birth rate until the mass of humanity becomes extinct. Soft-hearted elites. Everyone's physical needs will be satisfied. All children will be raised under psychologically hygienic conditions. Everyone has a wholesome hobby to keep them busy. Anyone who becomes dissatisfied undergoes treatment, quote, in quote, treatment. Life will be so superfluous that people will have to be psychologically or biologically engineered to remove the need for purpose. These people may be happy in this society, but they most certainly will not be free. They will be reduced to the status of domestic animals. So, 1985, he's making these predictions.
I think
Do
that's
we think
I
he
think
has?
that's phenomenal that he came up with those.
Is there any? Do we agree that there might be that some of his thoughts should not be discounted without consideration?
Personally, I think we should be considering them. I don't see any reason that the elites will need a lot of people. What purpose will we serve if we don't consume? They'll need less of us.
He was way ahead of his time.
I still don't believe in blowing up buildings, but
I hear you.
Yeah.
But we're just thinking about his intellectual content. Okay, I think that's it. Any closing statements by anybody?
yes, I'm going to go to my grandson's birthday party.
I'm going to go dancing tonight.
That sounds great. I wish we would join you, but I can't get my wife to commit.
Okay. Anytime, just let me know.
Okay.
Micah.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you for attending.
Take care.
Bye, Robert. Micah.
I'm gonna sign off. Thanks everybody for showing up.
There's a hand up.
Okay.
Micah.
Yes, thank you. So just very quickly, I apologize for taking everybody's time. So one was that artificial intelligence was invented very first in the 1950s, when the term came into the discussion. So it wasn't very much out of perspective for in the 80s to write about artificial intelligence.
I see.
Right. So and another thing, we were So the question I had, I think we could leave the question for next time possibly, but a question I had was when he's talking about reforming the society, industrial society, I was wondering if an engineered society is something that he completely dismisses or he agrees that could be done. Like I said, it's just a question we could leave for later, but I also wanted to mention a couple of points. One is that humans are partially product of their genes and all those things, and partially product of their habits. So everything that I learn as a human being in my society from the moment I open my eyes, I open my phone, I read the news, I look at social media, I see which social influencer is telling me to buy what, I have an effect on my society, on myself, on my family, and on my society. So a huge part of the power the way society changes, yes, part of it is in the hands of the rich, wealthy, and powerful, and a huge part of it is also on myself. And I think this talking always about the people in power, right, is somehow getting rid of responsibilities or freeing ourselves from the responsibilities that we have as individuals, and I do not agree with that. Now, when it comes to surveillance, this is very interesting when we think about technology constantly watching us. I think we've had that throughout the centuries with religion and with culture. Today, we have technology following us everywhere, and many religions still around the world. I can see it in a variety of religions that people form groups, form bubbles, form people that could watch over one another so you don't get out of line. They could accept you, they could shun you, they could hate you, and they could form mobs to actually harm you. So again, I think what's happening is just we're changing from one form of control to another. Thank you.
Good points. Good points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thanks everybody for showing up.
Thanks, Christopher.
Yes, thank
Very
you.
good presentation.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to stop recording.
Okay, got it. Bye-bye.